Hello guys, welcome back. And previous video we saw how we can implement JWT token and how can we secure our API, right? Now in this video we are going to see role based authentication. That means we created role for a specific staff, right? And then the staff should be authenticated based on their roles. If let's say a staff is calling delete API but the role is, let's say, staff, not the manager, then we should restrict the access to the specific API and we should return certain error. That means you don't have access to delete this specific stuff, or you don't have access to delete these books, right? And of course in the case of staff should not have access to a staff list page as well, right? He should not be able to see staff list page. Instead he will just see the staff page. And how we can do that? So we can do here one more thing. We need to just very first thing we need to do is we need to write a login functionality for a staff. And how can we do that? We'll say, okay, this time I'm going to say this auth controller is going to handle those functionality, not the staff controller, because this is related to authentication. So all those authentication related things like sign up, login, or changing of certain password or something should be here instead. Okay, so I'll just copy paste here and I will say, okay, not login in this case, I'm going to say login staff. Alright, and then login detail is going to be same. Staff is also going to log in through their email as well as password, right? So but this time we need to change the log here. I will say auth controller dot login staff, and then we should have a functionality over there in the auth service so that we can use that function to log in as a staff user. So we'll go back here in the staff and then not here but auth service, and there we can say, okay, we have login for the user and then we should have a login for the staff as well. This is the way we can just segregate all those functionality and we can maintain a modular piece of code so that it can be modified easily. So I will say staff, and in this case of course login DTO will be there, rest of the thing will be as it is, only the functionality will change. But then here I will say, okay, login is there, we need to get the data of a staff as well. So I'll just copy paste this functionality here, but here it will be staff, not staff but staff, right? No, we should not take data from the user service. Instead this time data will be coming from the staff service, but for that we need a staff service here in the auth service. So I will inject the staff service here as well. So I'll say I staff service, right? And then this staff service should also be passed to the function so that we can use those function and inject the specific variable, right? So here I'm going to say, okay, let's use the staff service as well, and then assign this staff service here so that we will have access of this staff service here in the auth service, right? And then what I'm going to say here is, okay, this time just use staff service instead of user service. So I will say staff service dot, we don't have this function in the staff service, so we need to make that. And for that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in user. I will just copy paste that functionality over there because it will work in the same way. So this is the actually benefit of following a certain design pattern, following a certain structure pattern, so that we can just add as many as functionality on top of existing one. So here I will say, okay, go back in staff service and create that function. So I will say find one user, not user, this time find one staff by user by email. So here instead of user repository we need to say staff repository, and find one by key we will use the same, and this time it is not going to be user. First let's import this model, and then this time we will say it is going to be staff. Alright, and then rest of the functionality will work as it is, but not user. We will use staff key as well so that we can know that this is a staff, not the user. If we'll use user, then it is going to be of course confusing because user is the owner of the shop, correct? So let's save this and then provide this functionality above to the interface as well so that we can use the interface method instead of the actual implementation, correct? I will save it and we have the functionality ready, I believe. what is the exact error we are getting over here. So okay, once this will be saved, it will work as per expectation. So it's not getting saved actually because of some issues. Let me go back to staff service, and okay, this is saved. Then what is the issue exactly over there? So find one staff by email, then find one staff by email, that is actually correct. So where the issue is, cannot use staff service in return statement, does not implement I staff service find one staff by mail. Actually we have implemented this functionality, since the same we have copied it from, okay, this should not be user service, in this case this should be staff service. Error was correct. So now this is fine, and then we will go back here in auth, and here we can say find one staff by email, and we should be able to get those data now. But in this case, of course, user we should not use user, instead we will say this should be staff. So staff, and then this should be changed to staff as well. Let me copy this and do this functional, match this here as well, and then here as well. So now the token will be there, but then this time not a user but the staff ID. Now this staff will have a specific role, and how can we take out the role from staff? We can take out from staff itself. We don't have to provide the role explicitly. In case of user, we don't have role over there, right? So we introduced, we just put that static value, and here in case of staff, we are going to say staff.role. Okay, so that it will work in the same way. We don't need to change any client code, right? Now we have a staff role over there. We should be able to log in through this staff, right? Let me just save it, and I'll show you one interesting thing over there. So let me just save it here as well. We have that functionality related to not login. We should have a login staff, right? And then we need to map this to route as well, so that we can access this route. So here what I'm going to say is, okay, user service is there, we need one more, and what is that? What that is going to be staff service. So I'll just copy paste it here, and I will say user service, not user, staff service. So I'll say staff service, staff, and then service, and then here we need to get staff service, right? Now I will be passing the same staff service here, so that it staff service will have, not a staff service but staff auth service will have the access of staff service. All right, so we are good with that. Now we are going to say, okay, you have also login feature. Now staff will have also login feature, and we can verify that quickly. And this time I'm going to just say not login, let's say login through staff. So I will say, okay, login / staff, for example, and then this time this is going to be login staff. Now the question is how we can call this login staff, right? We need to provide certain functionality on the UI, or certain key or a flag, so that based on the flag we should be able to categorize, okay, user is login, or we can say staff is login, right? So for that, what I'm going to do is I will just go back in client. We are done with the actual server, and then we'll go back in client. We just need to design a little part of the login. So we need a switch over there, so that we can say, okay, if this switch is not enabled, that means you are login as a staff, or if else this switch is enabled, you are login as admin. So how can we do that? We'll open this views, and we have this staff over here, add staff. So I'll just copy paste that switch code from here and reuse that. So let's search for, okay, app switch is there, so I'll just copy this from here, right? And then I will go back in authentication folder where we have a login file, and there we can say, okay, you have this button, login button, then you keep one more thing over there, that is app switch, and then based on the switch you will decide which API to call. So here I will say, okay, not status, you can say admin, right? So not type admin, but you can say logged in as logged in as, actually this title should be dynamic based on the input. So this time what I'm going to say is I'm going to introduce one variable over here, and I will say, let's say type. Alright, and by default I'm going to say, okay, by default it will be staff only. Alright, not the admin, not the owner of the shop. So that's completely fine. I will bind this key over here, type switch. Okay, and then this should also be there, the checked variable. So how can we do that? We are going to say, okay, this, if this is checked, so I can say type switch value, and then I can say by default it is going to be false. So I'm going to bind this same value in the switch, so that same value in the switch, not staff.status, this is type switch value. Now I need to say, okay, on app switch change, I need to define this variable and detect those values what is there. So based on that we are going to define the title, and I'm going to say, okay, title is not now going to be dynamic, and this time it is going to be type, or you can say user type login message. Alright, so I'm just going to define that variable over here. I will say user type login message, and this time by default it is going to be say login as staff, right? Or else we can say login as admin, so that once user will click on that, it will change to login as a staff, right? That we'll see on UI. So login as admin, and we should have this function over there. So I'll just copy this and paste it here, right? In the method section I'll just paste it, and here we'll have event, and then what I'll do here is I will just check this event value. And how can we check that? We are going to say, okay, constant, and then in that case I'm going to say actual value, and then event dot target dot checked. If that is the case, right, if it is checked, that means if value is true, then we are going to say, okay, you just use this dot user type login message as, let's say, login as admin, and or else you just use login as staff. So I'll just copy it and paste it here, and then in the else part I'm going to say, okay, just use login as a staff. So I'll just copy it here and paste it here, login as a staff, right? Now one more thing we need to say here is this login user, right? So this login user now should be calling that login API based on this value, type switch value. If it is false, we need to call a staff login. If it is true, we need to call admin login. And for that we need that API in place as well. So I'm going to go back in URL, first define that API over there. So for login we are going to define one more API, and this time I'm going to say staff login URL. So we know that route we have defined as login / staff. We are done with URL. Let's go back in API, and then we'll use the same functionality as login. I will just copy it from here and I will paste it here. And then we need to say, okay, this time I'm going to use staff login, right? So you need to define it as a staff login functionality. But this time no more login URL, it's going to be staff login URL, correct? So let's save this. You are done with creating APIs. Now you need to call these APIs in the actions method, since we are triggering those APIs from the actions method. So we need to go into a store and then auth store, and then here in actions method we need to create one more method. Let me copy this and paste it for staff login. So I'll say this time staff login, and then rest of the thing will be as it is, right? Okay, rest of the thing will be as it is. I will just save this, and this time we will be having role as well in the we are providing token. Now this time we should have role as well in from the service, so that based on the role we should be able to show the list item in the menu as well, right? So we need to make one more changes over there, but before that let's see. Staff login is fine. Now we should be able to call this staff login here. So I will say okay, staff login, and then I'll say staff login since method name is the same. So now here we cannot directly call this API. I will just check for that. If the value, I will say if this dot, not this dot, and type switch value is true, that means we should be logged in as a staff, not a staff but as an admin. And if this is false, means of course we are going to be logged in as a staff. So in else part I will say okay, else, just paste this, and this time it is going to call not like this. We need to format this properly, and then this time I'm going to say staff login. So I'll just copy this and paste it here, right? Rest of the thing will be as it is. We don't need to care about that, and the functionality should also be working in the expected way. Let's save it and go back to UI apps and see if that changes, works fine. So I'll just refresh this page and I will log out, and then we will see if we have that key over there or not key but the field. So even though we have used that, but we have not imported that over there. And what is that exactly? We need to import ion switch there so that we can use that. So I'll say ion switch. Ion switch, is it there? Not ion switch, it should be ion toggle actually. So I'll say not ion toggle, it should be app switch actually, since we have created custom app switch component, right? So let me just save it now and then see if that works fine. I'll go back here. You can see here we have a switch over there, so you can just click on those switch and you can be able to log in based on the condition. Let's see which API is getting triggered this time. So I will say okay, let's log in as a staff, and I'll provide this function or functionality. So I'll say okay, this time I'm going to say okay, use just John, or I'll just go in DB and I will check the staff john@gmail.com and password. So I'll say john@gmail.com, and then I'll provide password as wrong password 1, let's say. And if I'll click login, but still we are able to log in. How is that even possible? Is that password 1? No, it is password. Then it should verify for the password actually, and it should be throwing error. But this time we are not getting any error. And why is that so? So what is the case? And let's see which API is actually triggered. Let me click OK, and then OK, network tab is also not there. So let's see that what data we got actually. No, we are not getting any data, I believe, and application is also. So then there is something here, some issue is there. We need to rectify that. For that we need to go back to login once more, and let's check that why exactly that happens. So come back in login page and then see. Okay, we can trigger this staff login. That's completely fine. And then if that is successful only, then only we are going to call this, or else we are not going to call this at all. So where does that triggered function over here? There's no login function. Let me just refresh the page and see if all changes are there. Okay, go back in network console and then we'll try to do it once more. I will say john@gmail.com, and then I'll say password as well, and then click on login. It's directly calling get all books instead of calling that specific method, right? And what is that method actually? That is a login method. And why is that so? Okay, unknown local action type, staff login, global type, auth stored staff login. That means this function is not there saying. We must have missed something. So let's go back in authentication and there see, okay, this S is capital over there. So that is the issue. Let me just save it now and go back to UI. I will refresh the page and see if that works fine. So now we have that page ready over there, and I will say john@gmail.com, and then I will say okay, password should be password, and I'll say 1. Let me just click on login. You can see something went wrong. That means this API is giving error. And why is that so? Login is actually getting triggered, but this login is actually login. It should be staff login, not this one. So we need to just revert that condition here in the login page, and then it should be working fine. So I'll say if not type switch value, then in that case you need to trigger sign in, or else you need to trigger staff login, but that was not the expectation. So here expectation was okay, not like this. So I'll say okay, this is the case, and then let's check once more. Now I'll just select login. You can see again login is getting triggered, and then here we need to just swap this with the if and else. So I'll just copy paste it here, and this I'll paste in else block so that it will get executed in the reverse way. Let me save it and see if that works. Let's go back in UI, and this is fine. Let me refresh this once more, and now try to log in. I'll say john@gmail.com, and password I will be entering as wrong password. So you can see something went wrong, and then still login API is getting triggered. Actually it should trigger staff login, not the login. Why is that so? So let's verify that what is the key actual there. So I'll open this component, login component, not component but the page, and we should be able to see what is the value over there. So type switch value is false actually. So if this is false, it should actually trigger okay, that is the issue. So I'll say okay, just cut it from here, switch back, and if this is false, that should work in expected way, right? If this is false, means staff login should be there instead of login, right? Let me just save it and test that once more if that works fine. Refresh this and check. But before that, before login, this time I'm going to verify this if it is false. So I'll just click on this login page, and then you can see type switch value is false, then it should trigger login API. Okay. So for that I'm going to go back in network console, and I will put all those data. I'll say john@gmail.com, and then password I'm going to say password. Let's log in and see if that works. Still login is getting triggered, and why is that so? It should not trigger login API. That means we need to verify actions whether we have changed the functionality over there. Okay, we are still calling login here. Instead we need to call staff login, right? So we need to call staff login here, and then it should be working in the expected way. So this time there should not be any issue, and this is how we are going to debug our application. Let me just clear this, and now I'll put john@gmail.com, and then password I'll put as a wrong password. You can see invalid credential is coming now. That means this API is working fine now, and you can see here staff login is getting triggered, right? But what if I'll put correct password? So in that case, what will happen? Let me just click on that, and you can see we are able to log in. We are able to see this page, book list page, but then we are able to see staff list page as well, which is not expected, right? Because this staff list, as a staff I should not be able to see this page, right? And this time of course this data is not coming. F9 is there. Yeah, this won't be working because we are providing bookshop ID, and in this case we are taking out the user data, I mean staff ID, and the data which is saved over there, the admin has created those data, right? Those book data. So bookshop ID will be different. That is why the data is not coming, but we are able to see these options, right? So we should restrict this option based on the roles, and we need to pass the role in the body as well, so that we should be able to know on the UI, okay, this is of this specific staff is of certain roles, then only we are going to show this, right? So let's do that quickly, and then we will also do validation. But first let's do validation, so that we this get all stuff should not be, not get, yeah, this get all stuff should not be triggered. It should be basically authorized, and you won't be having access for this. So how can we do that? We know that we have created a middleware function to authenticate the request. Now this time we are going to, okay, it will, token will be there, it will authorize for the token, that's correct. But then we need to authenticate based on the role as well, and we have that role over there. So what I'm going to say here is, in auth middleware, okay, let's define one more function, and it will check based on the roles, right? So I'll say authenticate, not request but role, and then I will be accepting role here. Of course it is going to be of type string, and then it will return handler function. This is how we are going to create a middleware function, and this function must be returning you can say instance of gin context, or gin, it should be returning a gin function, right? So now here we need to do that functionality. So I'll say, okay, you are providing roles, and then I will have access of context as well. So I will first take out the role from the context which we have set over here. So I'll say, okay, role, let's take out the role from, not role, actually we can say context role, and then take out this role from context. So I'll say context.get, and this time is string. So I'll put that key role. Now if the role is not there, of course we need to abort the request. So if, let's check if ctx dot role, not ctx dot role, we can say ctx role not equals to not equals to not, that is in JavaScript, but we are handling in Golang. So we can say not equals to the role which we are passing here. If that is not the case, then in that case just abort this request. And how can we do that? We'll just copy this from here and paste it here. That means you don't have access to the specific page, you cannot do this functionality. And we need to restrict on the UI as well, so that those functionality will not be visible to the specific user or for the certain roles, right? And somehow if they are able to manipulate that UI from the element, inspect it and then make it visible, even after that also this controller function, not controller but the middleware function, should be able to omit that request and then force the user to redirect to login page. That's the expectation, right? So here I'll say ctx.abort, and that's completely fine. But if role is there, we'll say you can go ahead on the next middleware or next controller function, right? So I'll just click save, and then I'm going to use this role everywhere where we need to authenticate based on the roles. So I'll say, okay, as a staff, right, not here but in routes, I'm going to say as a staff you should not be accessing the staff routes, because this is only for admin. So before that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, not here but you can say we need to define one folder now for sure. So I'm going to say, okay, create one folder, and this folder is going to be holding all the constant file, and here I'm going to say constant.go, right? Package is of course going to be constant, and here I'm going to say constant and then this bracket. So we'll have all those constant here, and this time I'm going to say role, right? Role, and role, not role but I'll say roles, and this time roles is going to be, let's say, what, can we make it a struct over here? No, roles is going to be an array. So I'll say, okay, it's going to be an array of a string, right? So that's completely legal, right? And then in string I will say, okay, you will have manager role, and then you will have a staff role as well, right? Then why is it giving error? String is not a constant. Why is that so? Can we say constant roles equals to roles, and then I'll say string of array, right? Array of a string actually. I will say manager, and then I'll say staff. So what is wrong in that? It's still giving error. Value of array string is not constant. Type is string. String is set of. That's wrong. So how can we define a constant then? Okay, let's hold this for now. We'll do this in the next video. But for now, what I'm going to say here is, okay, let's use that middleware function. So we know that we have middleware over there. So I will just say middleware, right? And then I will say middleware dot. Since middleware is already there imported, I believe in auth routes. So if we have imported certain fields, or if it is present there, not auth routes, but the book routes, I believe. So if it is there, we don't need to import that. We can just use that because this will available for this entire package, So staff route is already there in routes package. So we can say, okay, we don't need this actually. So I will just remove this from here, and I will say, okay, middleware dot. What was the name of that function? Let me just paste this here. Authentication role, authenticate roles, right? And now this authentic we should be able to put authenticate request as well, so that no one can access this staff route as well. So I'm going to put authentication first, then only we are going to check for the roles. And here we are just going to provide the role. And how can we do that? So actually what we are going to say is, okay, let me go inside this function, not like this. I need middleware actually. So let's import this middleware, and then what I'll say, okay, go back here in this middleware file, authentication middleware, and then here instead of roles you will be getting roles, so that we can verify which roles is actually suitable in your case. So I will say, not like this, I will say array of strings. All right. Now how can we check if that role exists over there? So for that we need a loop over the, we need to loop over that roles. So I'll say for role, right? For role in, not in, I will just range over these roles, right? Now we have access to the role, a specific role, and this is not the role actually, this is index. So I'll say omit this index, I need role, right? Now this role is going to be string. So now I'll say, okay, if the role matches, then only we are going to go ahead. For that we need a variable. I'll say role matches, role matched, you can say, or just put is role matched. That makes more sense, is role matched, right? And then here I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be false default, and then in case if role matches, we are just going to make it true. I'll just copy it, let it be here. So I'll just say if role equals to I will just say if any role matches with the specific roles, okay, ctx dot, not ctx but the ctx role, and if that matches, we are just going to say, okay, this role matches equals to true, and then we are going to break roles, break this for loop actually. And then finally we will say, okay, if this role matched, right, we don't need this anymore here. If this role matched, if this role doesn't match, we are going to return error, or we are going to go into next middleware or the authentication, not authentication but the controller. So finally I'll go back here in the routes, and here I will say, okay, this is fine. We need middleware dot, we don't have that function over there, so I'll say within middleware dot, okay, we have that function there. So I'll say authenticate role, but then here we need array of roles, right? So who all can access this specific request, this specific API? So we can say that, okay, right, And here we can say, okay, manager can access, of course he will have access, and then I can say, okay, owner can also access this, and then staff should not have access. So I am not going to give a staff here, so that this API will throw error for the staff, since staff itself cannot create a staff, right? Let me just copy it from here and put a validation on all of the API of a staff, so that a staff should not have access to any one of these. But yeah, a staff should have access to get a staff by ID, so that a staff can get the request, not get the request, but get the data of itself. So I'm going to put staff here as well, so staff will have access for this API, and update, staff can do update as well. So I'm going to put staff, right? Now in this case, staff can basically all role will have access to, update of the staff, right? And then delete, of course, delete, who can do delete? So we need to put restriction there as well. Manager or owner can delete the staff, not the staff itself. We are done with this, and we are going to do similar functionalities on book as well. So a staff should have access to get all books, but not the create. So I'll say, okay, manager will have access, and then owner will have access. And here we are going to say staff will have access to get all those books. That's fine, get book by ID as well, but staff cannot be able to update the books. Only manager can update the books. It again completely depend on you how you are going to make this functionality, but this is just for making you understand how it is working. Very first we implemented JWT token, right? Based on the token we are authorizing the request, and then we are authorizing based on the role as well. So here I'm just going to say, okay, you this as a staff, you should not have access to delete as well. So I will say you won't be have access to delete. So now here you can see one thing. Everywhere we are calling this authenticate role just after authenticate request. Why? Because after authenticate request only, right, after authenticate request only, we are going to get the role in that specific context, right? So then that's why we are calling this authenticate request role after this authenticate request middleware. So that is it. Let's save it and go back. One more thing we need to do here is we need to return role, so that we can restrict the UI as well. So for that, where we need to go is we need to go back into the service. In case of user service, I'm going to say, okay, so where we are returning the user data here, right? Not here, but let's say go back to auth service here. So here in case of user, I'm returning user and token, and then I will return one more thing over here, role. So in case of user, I will say, okay, user is going to be owner, and then in case of staff, I'm going to say role is going to be, okay, role is there already, but in case of login staff, we should be passing the token as well, right? So role we are passing over there, that's completely fine, but here we need to assign role as well in case of staff. So in case of staff, we are going to say, okay, your role is going to be staff.role, not the hard-coded one, right? So that it will be exactly your roles, right? And role can be manager, role can be staff as well. So let me just save it now, and then it should be working. Our application should be working in an expected way. We are finally done with our application. We have implemented JWT authentication, and we saw how it works, how we can create API, how we can create token using JWT library, and then how can we verify those tokens as well on the middleware itself. And the same we did in request interceptor in the client side, so that we can request all those, we can actually feed that token in each of the request if the token is present there. This is how we need to create our application more secure, and this is how we can make our application more robust, right? And what else we have left over there in application? Next, we will, in upcoming videos, we will see how we can create a build of our application and deploy it on, let's say, GCP. In this case, I'm going to use GCP Cloud Run to deploy the application, and it will be actually packed in a container. And for that also we are going to see some part of the Docker, not the full Docker, but it is going to be, we will just learn how we can create bind application, wrap our application inside a Docker container, and then those those application will get deployed as a containerized application on GCP or whichever cloud service provider you want. Okay, so I'll just save it and let's go back in UI and test those functionality if that is working fine. So I'll just refresh it and see if API is working or not. You can see here the API is now getting failed because as a staff you should not have access to get all staff, right? So that's why this is giving error. Now this time let me just log in as a admin, and for that I'm going to use admin credential over here. That means owner credential, owner of the shop credential. So I'll say password and then I'll click login. Okay, still it's showing staff. Why is that so? It should be logged in as a staff actually. So let me just do it and see if the key is true, then only this login will get triggered. I'll click on this and click on login, and you can see the value is actually false over there. It should be true by default. Type switch value is false over there. Let me just click on this once more and click on login. Still we are getting the same issue over there. Staff is getting logged, staff is getting called a staff login. In this case actually the login API should get triggered, and why is that not working? Let's see. So I'll click on this once more and then see if that is fine. So go back in login and then see the type switch value is actually not changing. It should change. So how can we check that? We need to go back in client and then of course the login page, and there we can verify the property. And here I'm going to say okay, staff, not a staff but the auth, and then there we will be having this login. And you can see here we are binding this value. Even though we are binding this value checked, but then if there's any change, this type switch value should also change. And how can we change this? Okay, we need to change that here. So if we'll say value, so I'll say this dot, if this is true means we need to make this variable true, right? Or else we can say, since it will be emitting the actual value, so we just need to reverse this, and if this is false means we need to make it true, right? So this dot type switch value equals to true, right? Let me save this and check if that works fine. I'll go back to UI and let's open this login page once more and check if that works fine. So I'll click on login page here, login component of course, and this is default false, and if I'll click on this you can see it is true, right? So now I'll just click on this email feed, the owner email over here, and then if I'll say password, now I should be able to log in as a shop owner, or you can say admin. So I'll click on login, you can see we are able to log in, and then we have access to this book page, but then we will verify staff list page as well. So it is still throwing unauthorized. That means it is still not working. Staff is not having the access to that specific API. And why is that so? Let's see that. So very first thing what I'll do is I'll just copy this token from here. And how can we do that? So I'll copy this token from here, copy it, and then I'll go back to JSON token so that we can decrypt that token and see if, yeah, it has role of owner actually. And then do we have owner over there? Let's see. So we need to go back to the server and see if we have provided access for the owner. So here where we need to go, of course we need to go in routes and then staff routes, and then we need to see here, do we have the role as owner? Yes, we have. Then why it is not working? It should work actually. So this owner will be there, and then we need to debug this here. So I'll just close this server from here we need to start our Golang application as a debugger. So let's start the application as a debugger. Meanwhile, we'll try to understand why is that happening. So this function will have then in that case manager as well as owner. So if I'll go in authenticate role, now if the specific JWT is authenticated, then we should be getting those role over there, and this time the role will be of course owner, right? So if owner is there, and what we are trying to do is we are just taking out each of those role and matching it with the context role. If any of the item matches, we are making it is role matched as a true, and then we are finally breaking it, right? And if role is not matched, then we are throwing error, or else if it is matched, then we are passing this to the next function, next controller function, then why it is breaking. So let's click on this here and click on here as well, and then I'll put one breakpoint here, here as well. Now I'm going to trigger the same request from here UI, and then we will see if that works fine. So what I'm going to do here is, of course we are now successfully logged out. Let me just click log out, and then I will log in once more. You can see we are successfully logged in, and then I will try to load the staff list page once more, and we will see what is happening over there. Is there something happening? No, the request itself is not triggering here, and why is that so? Is there something breaking? Let's go back to UI and console as well. So still we are seeing that issues. Let me just refresh this page and see if that works. Okay, now request is coming here, and then let's see if role matches. Role doesn't matches. How come? So just hover on this roles. You can see manager is there, and then owner is also there. But then what is the value of this context role? It is coming as empty. That means the token is not authenticated for sure. Otherwise we will have the role there. And why is that so? So the request is getting aborted, and then it should be actually returned from here. Return. Okay, it should not go to the next functionality, next controller function, and then we need to debug here why it is not there actually. So we are taking out the role. It should be there. So let's do that once more. We are actually logged in, successfully logged out, since we are returning 401. So here I'll say logged in once more, and then test. So I'll say password, and I'll logged in as staff, not staff but logged in as admin. So I'll click on login. We are able to log in, but then okay. So request is coming here, and we are let's see we are getting the user ID or role or not. So let's see. Yeah, we have role over there, and we are setting the role in the context as well, context.set as role. Then I will just click on here, and then finally we are good with all these APIs, right? We are successfully logged in, we are able to fetch all those book details, but then in case of staff, why it is not working? So for that, what I'll do is I'll just go here and I will load a staff page once more, right? It's loading from cache, so there's no record. If I'll just refresh this page, and then we should be able to trigger that API. Okay, so it's directly coming here instead of coming here. That means there's something happening over here. Either the token is expired or something happens for sure. That is why this else part is not getting triggered. And how can we verify that? Let's verify that here. Let's put a breakpoint all over there so that we can verify, okay, the token is getting bypassed, or what is exactly happening over there. So did we make bypass as a true, or token is not there? How can we say that? So this is actually happening, and then we are getting unauthorized, but then we need to log in once more to check this properly, and I'll say gmail.com, right? And password is of course password. I will try to log in as a admin, and I'll click on login. So this is fine. Our API is stopping there, and we have token as well, so I'll just let it pass. It won't go inside, it won't go inside, and here also it won't go inside. Then this will work as per the expectation, right? But then let's see in case of staff list. So I'll click on a staff list. I'll just refresh this page to load the latest data. Actually this should be reactive, we'll check those, but then here it's not coming. That is what happening over here. That is why it's returning error. That means authenticate request itself is not there. Because of that it is not working. And how we can say that? Let's go back in routes, and this time of course staff routes, and there's no authenticate request over there. That is why it is not working, right? So we just need to copy paste this here as well, here as well, then only we will have those roles present over there, right? So this was the issue actually, and you can verify, you can resolve these issues by debugging this code. So one last time we are going to see if that works or not. I will just go back in debug, and I will remove all those breakpointers, since our expectation is this time it should be working fine. And let's see that if that works. So server is getting restarted. Just wait for a couple of seconds, and then it should be working as per expectation. I'll go back in UI, and I will trigger those APIs once more, and we will see if that works. So that's fine, and then I'm going to put email, right, and then password also I'm going to put here, and then I'll just click on login, and this time I'm going to log in as admin, so we need to trigger this to true, and then I'll say login. And you can say this time also we are going to log in, but no need to be very happy this time, since we need to test staff list. I'll go on a staff list and just refresh this API, and this time expectation is it should be working. You can see now this is working fine, right? We are logged in through admin, and then we are able to see these details, but then staff will not have access to this. Now there's one more issue here. We know that staff should not have access to delete any of the book. So let's log out and log in as a staff, and this time I'm going to say john@gmail.com, and then password is going to be password, and then I will log in as a staff. So we have all those book item over there, but if I'll click on delete, let's say, and see if that is working fine. So I clicked on delete. You can see we are not able to delete, and it forces us to redirect to login page, because we have defined role-based authentication over there in the middleware. That means we are saying you have staff roles and you are trying to delete this item, so I won't allow you to do that, right? And I will force you to redirect to login page. That is what happening here, right? So this is how role-based authentication works, and of course we need to hide this from the UI as well. So let's do that here as well, and let me just log in once more. Login successful, and then in the application we should be able to see this time role as well. You can see role as well there, right? And let's verify that in view DevTools as well. I will go in view X and then the auth store, and inside logged in user we should have a role as well. We'll have a role there. So what I will do is I'll just go back here, and we need to go back to client. We are done with the server. We need to go back to client, and here what I'm going to say is, okay, let's open this Sarsi views and then go to home page, and then there only we are showing all these items, but this item should be visible based on the roles, right? So what I'll say here is get the user details here, logged in user details. Okay, we have the login user details over there, so I'll just copy it from here, and I will say okay, this else is fine, but then we need vif as well, and where we need to put vif. So this is a staffs, right? So we don't need to provide this option in case of user is logged in as a staff. So I'll say vif, okay, and then get logged in user dot, and then I'll say role is going to be staff. So actually this should be matched with this should be actually matched with static data, which should be defined in a constant, but for now I'm just doing it. You can follow the same pattern of defining all those constant in a constant file. Okay, so let me just control Z, so that, okay, this should be there actually, but I need to remove this from here. So I'll say, okay, user.role should be staff. User.role should not be a staff actually, then only this should be visible, and then we can add lot of condition over there in later if we want. So I will just save this, and then I will do one more thing. I need to hide that delete button as well from there. So where can we hide that? Of course, we are showing the book list, and then inside book list we need to say, okay, we have delete button over there, maybe, yeah, here. So here also, if we'll have access to login user, do we have access? No, we don't have. And how can we say that? So let's paste this here. Let's take out those logged in user data here as well, and here I'm going to say, instead of bookstore, let's use auth store this time, because get logged in user is present on the auth store, not the bookstore, right? So I'll just copy paste this, and fine. Now I'm going to use the same over here, and this is the delete icon. So I will say in the very beginning, or you can say at the last as well. So I'll say, okay, if this is not going to be staff, so I'll say, okay, that's fine. You need to say role not equals to staff, then only this delete button will get visible, or else this won't be visible at all. So let me just save it, and then if later if you are changing certain functionality, if you are defining certain roles, then again you need to play with this role functionality and make it compatible with the latest changes, but the concept will always remain same. This is how you need to do it. All right, we are done with this, and we'll go back to UI, and we can see we don't have that delete option since we are logged in as a staff. And also if I'll click on this, and you can see we don't have this staff item over there, so we cannot route to that page as well. This is how we are going to restrict our UI. This is how we are going to restrict all those functionality based on the JWT token and based on the role based authentication. And the same way the company works, big companies are using this authentication mechanism in the same way, and they might be using certain different principle for authentication, but concept will always remain same. They will be using all these concepts, and basically you should be doing authentication based on the roles or based on certain functionalities. So that is it for this video, guys, and we are done with the application. Let me just close it, and finally let's log out and we'll test it once more. I'll just click login, and then I am able to log in here, but then we have two functionality left over there. One is, of course, we need to implement pagination, and then we need to able to search the book with the specified name or with the specified code, right? Not only book, but the staff name as well. So we will do that in the upcoming videos, and then finally we will build this application and deploy it somewhere on the, in this case I'm going to use Cloud Run. Thank you guys, we'll meet in the next video.